Howdy, and welcome to an episode of Untold Tales Retold. I'm your host, Connor Jones, and it must be an off week because you're here and I'm here, and we're all ready to listen to a story from the way back when. Before we get started, here's a message from our sponsors. This week, our sponsor is Basin Pharmacy in Basin, Wyoming. Basin Pharmacy is your hometown pharmacy, as well as your source for over-the-counter medicine, vitamins, and supplements. They also carry office supplies, Russell Stover's chocolates, and greeting cards. The friendly folks at Basin Pharmacy are happy to help with any of your medicinal needs, whether you have a prescription to fill or a question about your meds. You can stop in Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to noon. We are also sponsored by the Wyoming Welcome Program. The Wyoming Welcome Program offers two services to local businesses: Table Talk and the Wyoming Welcome Baskets. Wyoming Welcome Baskets are filled with promotional items for local businesses and distributed to new move-ins to the Bighorn Basin. Table Talk brochures include jokes, facts about the state of Wyoming, the month's holidays, and advertisements from our local businesses. These brochures are placed on restaurant tables in Cody and Powell for diners to peruse. So if you'd like to get your business name out there, please contact the folks at the Wyoming Welcome Program by shooting an email to HaleyJ, that's HALEYJ, at wyomingwelcome.com. Do you have a noxious weed problem? The team at 307 Pest Management can help. We offer residential and commercial noxious weed management that is safe and affordable. Whether you have a parking lot, a yard, or some production land that needs treated for noxious weeds, 307 Pest Management is ready to help get your weeds under control. Give them a call today for a free quote at 307-250-0614 or send an email to 307pestmanagement@gmail.com. Like I said, this is an Untold Tales Retold, and today we're throwing it back to the story from our first year of recording, If You Break It, You Fix It. And as the title suggests, there's some broken glass in this story and a lesson to be learned. So go ahead and take a listen. I think you'll enjoy it. This week's story is titled, You Break It, You Fix It. It was one of those mild fall afternoons in northern Wyoming that can make autumn your favorite season in spite of summer's lingering memories. The leaves on the cottonwood trees were just starting to turn a golden shade of yellow, and farmers were watching their bean crops like a coyote watching a prairie dog hole, eagerly anticipating the harvest. The sun was shining and the air was so clear, the Bighorn Mountains off in the distance appeared as if they were a mere mile or two away. Being a Saturday, Dad was home, and we had just finished eating lunch. Our family of 9 had been living in the trailer house on Poverty Flats for more than a year, and construction on the dream house, often shortened to simply the house, was well underway. Of course, when I say the 9 of us lived in the trailer house, I use the term house loosely. Firstly, the trailer was something of a hybrid structure, a combination of a single-wide mobile home and a built-on addition that included both a living room and the lair belonging to the trio of trouble, by which I mean my sisters. As living rooms go, ours was fairly nice, I guess, but I can't, or more accurately, shouldn't be able to speak for the appearance of the trio's lair, since I was forbidden to enter without suffering grievous consequences. The trio had informed me and my twin brother Fred, with the customary diabolical laughter older sisters are so good at producing, that entering the lair would almost certainly result in a full makeover or some other crime against humanity being enacted upon us, so we only entered when they weren't watching. The rest of the house consisted of a modest kitchen and dining room combination, a family room, a few more bedrooms, and a bathroom. The family room was the Swiss Army knife of the house, serving the triune purpose of family room, computer room, and sewing room. The knife-like quality of this Swiss Army knife family room came from the ceiling fan that threatened to fall from its moorings at any moment, making the space into a constant game of Russian roulette. Overall, the square footage of the entire house couldn't have amounted to more than 800 square feet, resulting in the population density of our trailer nearing that of ticks on a cottontail. We all still remember Dad's promise that our stay in the trailer house would be temporary, Mom most of all. Quite frankly, though, to us kids the trailer house was just that, our house. But hearing the way Dad described the dream house left us kids awestruck. The dream house, in our minds, came to be something of a cross between heaven and the Taj Mahal. Whenever Dad had to crawl under the trailer house to thaw a frozen pipe so our water would start running again, he would say, "When the dream house is finished, we won't have frozen pipes anymore." Whenever Mom took a break from the kitchen on a blazing hot summer day and stood in front of the swamp cooler, she would say, "When the dream house is finished, we'll have AC, and I'll be able to cook dinner without cooking myself." Whenever the trio of trouble fell to bickering among themselves, Candace would say, "When the dream house is done, I won't have to share a room." Whenever Al and I squatted with some toys on the 2-foot by 4-foot piece of carpet that constituted all the remaining space in our bedroom after 2 twin beds had been crammed in, we would say, "When the dream house is done, we'll have room to play in our room." At this point, Mom would scoop my little sister off the floor from beside her and Dad's bed and add, "When the dream house is done, Annie will have a room." Us kids may have taken things a little too far, but with all the fantastic things Mom and Dad predicted for the dream house, it was hard not to. One day when I predicted I would no longer have to do chores once the dream house was completed, Mom was quick to correct me. "Al," she said with a wag of her finger, "there will actually be more work to do in the dream house because it is bigger, and we are going to take excellent care of it, so don't get any ideas about chores going away." Oh, well, you can't have everything, I guess. But as far as the Joneses were concerned, the dream house was going to be a dream come true, and that's why the house and its completion were our main focus. Most of the family's free time, and all of my father's free time, was dedicated exclusively to its construction, and today was no different. So it was that Dad, my twin brother Fred, and I, along with my sisters, were headed out to continue construction on the house. Mom would soon follow with the 2 little ones. As we crossed the front porch with creaking steps, I watched my feet carefully, being sure to avoid the holes between the planks in the porch. Doing a one-legger on a wood porch is a great way not only to remove a good chunk of skin from your ankle, but attract plenty of unsolicited attention from your siblings. If the one-legger is conducted with enough finesse, the result can even become a favorite story that family members tell at your expense in embarrassing situations. Say, when you bring a member of the opposite sex home to meet them. Though at 7 years old, this wasn't yet one of my worries. Regardless of the reason I was carefully watching where I placed my feet, I never would have discovered the rock if my attention hadn't been focused on the ground. I had just stepped off the porch when I noticed, there in the gravel, a perfectly round rock. In addition to its unique shape, it was a cream color, which made it an anomaly among all the other gray rocks on the ground in front of the porch. Even then, discovering the rock excited me enough that I stooped down and picked it up. It's at this point in the story my wife informs everyone listening that while I can pick out an interesting rock in a gravel pit or notice a deer in thick brush at 1,000 yards, I am woefully incompetent when it comes to finding a bottle of ketchup in a refrigerator. That's just the difference between men and women, I guess. Men never hide interesting rocks or wild animals in a fridge, while women seem to be hiding things in there all the time. Even after growing up with 4 sisters and marrying a woman myself, their behavior still mystifies and astounds me. Anyway, after I had picked up this enigmatic rock, I quickly gave it an in-depth inspection. To my surprise and delight, I discovered this was indeed no ordinary rock, but a unique specimen that contained fossilized shells. Quickly deciding the rock would require further scientific analysis by Fred and I determined that I had better leave it on the porch so I could easily collect it when we returned from working on the house. What I did next required no thought at the time, but has frequently crossed my mind since. I find this to be the case with most choices I have come to regret. With a deft flick of my wrist, I tossed the stone toward the trailer house. In my head, I expected the stone to bounce once, then skitter harmlessly onto the porch. Unfortunately, what happens in real life seldom aligns with what happens in my head. In hindsight, it's a good thing I didn't throw the rock any harder than I did, or it may have brought the entire trailer house down. As it was, I watched in utmost horror as the stone disregarded my instructions entirely. Rather than skittering harmlessly into the gravel in front of the porch, the stone gleefully bounced in slow motion, once on one of the remaining boards in our porch, then smiled serenely back at me before performing a perfect impression of a cannonball as it sailed straight through the left pane of the trailer house's sliding glass door. When a sliding glass door gets shattered by no ordinary rock, it also produces no ordinary shatter. You would have thought a large quantity of plastic explosive had been detonated in a multi-story window warehouse had you heard the crash that sliding door made as it disintegrated. At least that's how 7-year-old me felt watching the greatest catastrophe of my young life unfold in front of me. In the interminable moments that followed, my life flashed before my eyes. Granted that 7 years constitute a very short life, the flashing occupied a mere second or two, and then the real terror set in. Surely my already short life was about to be cut even shorter by my father. I was a goner. I briefly considered making a break for the Canadian border, but since we hadn't yet covered cardinal directions in Cub Scouts, I wasn't even sure which way was north. Time stood still. Panic gripped me in its icy grasp, and I froze like a deer in the headlights. That is, until I noticed something very important. At the time I threw the rock, everyone else's back was turned to the trailer house. As soon as the earth-shattering crash of the rock split the afternoon air, all 5 of the other Joneses leaving the trailer house whirled around to see what could have caused such a ruckus. Since they all spun around at the same time, and we were standing in a relatively straight line, Dad wasn't sure who had thrown the rock. He knew it was one of the 5 children who stood staring, dumbfounded, at the empty space once occupied by a 7-foot by 4-foot pane of glass, but he didn't know exactly which one was responsible since he didn't see who threw the rock. I quickly realized I was not yet a prime suspect and snapped my outstretched arm back to my side as fast as I could, hoping Dad hadn't noticed its suspicious position. About then, time started moving again. "Who the... what the... how the..." Dad sputtered, his fists curling into balls and a vein starting to protrude dangerously from his forehead. Recovering a bit, he growled, "Who threw that rock?" 5 children pointed fingers at one another. To my great relief, they weren't all pointed at me. Fred angrily shoved my finger away from his chest so that it was pointing at Candace. For a long moment, Dad looked up and down the row of children, his eyes boring into our souls. When his eyes rested on me, I felt like he could see every thought running through my mind like subtitles on a TV screen. A long moment passed, and finally I couldn't take it any longer. "It was me," I squeaked. "What was that?" Dad asked. "I did it." Gulp. "I threw the rock," I said, uncertain whether to break into tears or start running for my life. "Whew," Dad sighed. Slowly, he removed his ball cap. He stood scratching his head for a moment, looking at the broken door, and ran a hand over his face. "All right," he finally said, replacing his ball cap again. "Thank you for telling me. Let's get this cleaned up." I suddenly realized that possibly I was not going to die after all, and a small grin snuck around my firmly closed lips. "Okay," I blurted out and ran for the broom. When your life has been returned to you in an instant, you're willing to do anything to hold on to it. Rather than work on the dream house that evening, Dad and I cleaned up the glass and safely transported the offending rock back outside. We then cut a piece of 3/4-inch plywood to fit the hole left by the now pulverized door and slid the whole thing into place as darkness fell. "Al, let this be a lesson to you," Dad said as he straightened up after putting the finishing touches on the replacement door. He looked me straight in the eye and said solemnly, "Don't ever throw rocks where there are windows to break." "Yes, Dad," I nodded. "And Dad?" I said. "Yes, Al?" "Thanks for not killing me." "You're welcome, son." I thought I might have seen Dad smile for the first time that day since the glass door shattered. For a few days, all went back to normal, except for the fact that the sliding door was no longer transparent and much heavier than it had been. Mom and Dad once again dedicated their free time to working on the house, and we kids pitched in where we could. For its part, the fossil rock remained benignly at rest in the gravel in front of the porch, and I stayed well away from stone projectiles. I had learned my lesson, yes sir. No more rocks for me. That is, until the day Fred and I were playing in front of the house, making piles of gravel, and driving Tonka truck loads of rock around the driveway. I'm not sure how the conflict began, but I imagine Fred had stolen one of the trucks I wanted to play with. As is well known, Fred usually instigated any trouble between the two of us. For my part, I was merely retaliating in order to protect my rights. "Fred, I know you had the truck first, but you weren't playing with it anymore," I yelled, yanking the yellow truck away from him. "Al, I was shoveling gravel into it. I had it fair and square." "Well, if you want it back, you'll have to come get it." Fred leapt at me with all the fury a 7-year-old can muster, and it was on. We rolled in the gravel, kicking and yelling, biting and punching, like a sheepdog taking into a mountain lion. I can tell you from experience, rolling over the top of a Tonka dump truck is not an experience worth repeating. Before long, we were covered in dust and scratches, and Fred may very well have gotten his way if I hadn't had the presence of mind to break loose and try to run away with the Tonka truck in tow. "Hey, get back here!" Fred screamed at me. Reaching down, he scooped up the first rock that came to his hand. On closer inspection, he may have found this rock to be rather familiar. It was, in fact, almost perfectly round and an unusual cream color. If he had looked very closely, he may have noticed the tiny fossilized shells on its surface. But at that point in time, he was not focused on the rock so much as his target, which was now streaking across the gravel driveway. Drawing back, he took careful aim, then fired. I'm sure that fossil-encrusted rock would have knocked me senseless if it didn't have a mind of its own and a penchant for breaking glass. As it was, I had just enough time to duck behind my mother's minivan before the rock came hurtling toward my head. In a series of events not so unfamiliar to myself, the crash of breaking glass was followed by a stunned silence during which Fred stared in unmitigated horror at his handiwork. It was at that moment the wooden sliding door opened and Mom emerged from the trailer house. "Hey, get in the van, Al and Fred," she called. "We need to go to town." Shakily, I peeked out from around the van. Where the rear window should have been, there now gaped an open hole and a clear view of the glass-strewn interior of the vehicle. "It wasn't me this time, Mom," I yelled cheerfully. Mom said, absent-mindedly looking down at her grocery list. "Where's your brother?" she asked. "We need to go." Behind Mom, the trio of Trouble and the Littles issued from the trailer house as well, some of them pulling on their shoes still. In an exasperated tone, Mom huffed, "I said, where's Fred?" I looked around for Fred. He was nowhere to be seen. "I don't know where he went, but I didn't do it, Mom. Honest. He did it. It was Fred," I blurted out, bent on self-preservation. "Didn't do what?" Mom said, obviously oblivious to the gaping hole in the back of her minivan. "Oh, where is your brother?" She looked up and glanced around the yard. She still hadn't noticed the window. "Fred! Fred!" she called. Gee, Fred might have a chance, I thought. Apparently he, unlike me, had the good sense to disappear after busting a window. "Where is Fred?" Mom asked again, now irritated. "Wait, what is Fred doing down there?" Looking in the direction Mom pointed, I strained my eyes against the sun's glare. That's when I noticed it. There, about a quarter mile away, I could make out a small blonde figure hopping up and down next to the barbed wire fence that bordered the field below our house. "What on earth is he doing?" she muttered. "He looks like he's stuck in the fence." I shrugged and watched Fred trying desperately to free himself. "I'm not too sure, Mom." I pointed towards my twin brother's frantic figure flailing in the distance. "Is that the way to Canada?" Well, there you have it. Another untold tale from this side of nowhere. It's been a real pleasure sharing this story with you, and I hope you'll follow this podcast so you can get notified whenever new episodes are released. As always, if you'd like to get in touch, share a story of your own, or some feedback about the podcast, you can email me at untoldtalesthepodcast@gmail.com. We'll see you next time on Untold Tales from this side of nowhere, where we work twice as hard for half as much and still find time for the important things, like fishing. See you next time, folks.